Hello and welcome back to Property Price Guru, where we discuss all things property with the leading industry experts. And today I'm really happy to welcome on board my friend and colleague, Damian. So welcome, Damian. How you doing? You okay?
Hi, Jake. How you doing? Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, buddy. How are you?
Good. Yeah, really well. You're trying to keep busy in these interesting times at the moment.
They're certainly interesting, Jake. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So Damian and I actually have known each other for a very long time, haven't we? So old family friends. So
on my knee, Jake.
That's it. That's it. So it's great to get you on. And obviously we've been talking a little while about this. Damian covers Southend and surrounding areas for Prestige and Village. So I was really keen to have a chat with him. Last week, I'm not sure if you saw our last video, Damo, but I spoke to a chap called Joe Ryler, and Joe works for EXP, which is not a massively dissimilar model to Prestige and Village. So it'll be really interesting to speak a bit more today about the comparisons between both and how you're finding it as well, because Joe gave us some excellent insights last week about it. Before we get into that, I wonder if you could just give us a bit of background on yourself, Damo, because obviously you had a brief stint in agency before you started with Prestige and Village, but before that you weren't actually in the industry, were you?
No, I was in the rag trade for 25 years. I ended up in the supply chain, supplying all the high street stores that you can think of, really, from M&S, Topshop, Burton's, Matalan, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Primark, etc. And then obviously the small issue of a pandemic struck the country and things went a bit pear-shaped. Some leading high street names were left us, such as Debenhams and the Arcadia Group, which for those of us in the industry wasn't a big shock. It was the pandemic was the final nail in the coffin rather than the cause. So I'd become a bit disillusioned with the whole industry. I was commuting into London every day, 2 hours each way. So I was quite up for the opportunity when they offered redundancy. So I took that grasped that with both hands. And redundancy is not a big thing these days in that it's not a life-changing amount, but it's certainly a nice little backstop. I've been with the company 8.5 years. And so I didn't really have a plan at this point. So it was down to, right, well, what do I want to do next? And I started looking at the things that I'm interested in and what I like to work with. And it was actually a friend of mine that suggested, have you ever thought about being an estate agent? Have you thought about going into property? And it rang true because I had actually spoken to the person that had sold me my house a few years ago and said, I could be interested in this. So at that point, I was then approached by another licensee, Easy Property, which I did start with. It didn't last very long simply because I just saw flaws in the model in terms of it was a very low fixed rate price, which was great for the vendors, but it wasn't economically viable as a business model. It was a high volume. You'd have to sell a phenomenal amount of houses to make a decent living. But as a one-man band, your time would be too constricted in terms of trying to offer full-on wonderful customer service, but at the same time trying to find new properties. Then there wasn't space to do both. So I became a little bit disillusioned, but I was looking around, and that's when I was approached by the wonderful Prestige and Village, which I've been very happy with.
I was going to say, from a brand standpoint, I've said this to you in the past, it's a very strong brand, isn't it, Prestige and Village? So you can imagine
it's ironic, yeah, because I started with Easy because it was the association with EasyJet, etc. But I would find the first 10 minutes of any conversation was, well, Easy Property. Well, is that as in EasyJet? Well, why is EasyJet selling property? And it would cause this sort of, rather than being what I think we were all thought and all sold, was that it was going to be an immediate association with value and efficiency. It became a bit of a sticking block. And then there was little things where people were like, I don't really want an Easy Property board outside my house and things like that, which is a shame because they were great guys, and I've got nothing bad to say about them. But the Prestige and Village thing is amazing in that I'll say, estate agent, Prestige and Village, and people, I think I've heard of them. And they probably haven't because we're quite new on the market and certainly new in my area. But it has that sort of aura about it, and the branding and the logo, etc., is very strong. So it gives people a reassurance, and I think people are sort of already oh yeah, we can associate with that, and it sort of ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you sort of touched upon a bit earlier, when you made that step into agency initially with Easy Property, obviously your hand was forced a little bit leaving your previous role with obviously the pandemic and then the redundancy, but because you'd not been in the industry before, was that quite a big leap of faith for you? You know, when I spoke to Joe Rylett, as I mentioned last week, his scenario was a little bit different because walking into that or stepping into that self-employed model, if you like, he'd actually had the benefit of previous experience in the industry. So it was more so for him trying something a bit different within the industry. But obviously for yourself, it's almost a step into the unknown to a degree.
Yeah, very much so. And I was a bit scared, to put it bluntly, but I did feel that the logistics and the things that I needed to learn, they're things that you can learn. That's fine. But overall, I was convinced that providing great service, because you mix with friends, a lot of my friends, we've all bought, sold properties, etc., and there seems to be key things that spring up, and the main one is a lack of communication and a lack of service. So I felt, well, look, if I have to wing it on the first couple ones of what that means or what that happens, that's fine, as long as I'm there and I'm providing on-hand information, updates, and really working hard with the people that are trying to sell their property, then that was going to be a USP. So I was worried, and of course, there's been a couple of times where people have said things and all that, and I've had to do I'm not 100% sure on that. Leave that with me. I'll get back to you on that, because I just didn't know, which of course is a little downside. But providing you do that honestly and say, look, I'm going to find that out for you. I'm not sure, and rather than trying to wing it and string people a line and make it look like you know what you're talking about, I think people accept honesty, and that's the direction I've taken, is like learn on the job, but always be there on hand and provide the customer service. And I've been very lucky that the feedback and the reviews that I've been given have really reflected my efforts, if you like, that people are very aware, even from people buying properties from me, people lower down the chain, and obviously my vendors have been very, very impressed by the on-hand level of service and the communication, that I'm always available. And even if I ring you once a week and say, I've got nothing to report this week, but things are going as they should, people appreciate that, rather than just sitting there in the room.
Nothing. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that service is so key, especially, I think it's probably key in any industry, but particularly in a estate agency where predominantly your clients and the properties you're working with are all very, very local to you. There's probably a fair chance that some of your clients might even know each other. Certainly they'll know other people in the area that are potentially future clients. So providing that level of service and communication, it makes a massive difference long term.
Well, I think it's a vicious circle, isn't it? Because if you've got a bad agent, and I'm not singling anyone out, but if you've got an agent that's not great on communication, the solicitors, we know, are the bane of our life. They won't communicate. So for a vendor, it can be a very scary time, especially when you've got scenarios where they've got to give notice on a rented property because it's their first property, or they're under pressure to buy their next property, and they're just sat there not hearing a thing. It's really insecure making. I bought a property off plans. I bought a brand new property, and you think that would be easy, but it isn't. And sometimes you can go weeks and just go, well, what the hell's happening?
Yeah.
And just allaying people's fears and just saying, look, I haven't got anything major to report this week, but we are on it, and this has happened, and we're still chasing that, blah, 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 blah. People go, okay, great. Right. Okay. Speak to you next week. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And it just keeps the momentum going, and people feel that you're fighting their corner, and it feels that there's some momentum behind things, whereas opposed to a lot of people feel things are just out in the wilderness and what we're waiting for. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And to your credit, if you look at your reviews online, I mean, they're fantastic, aren't they? Some of the feedback you get and some of the reviews you get, they're all 5-star. You get some fantastic feedback there, which is obviously testament to that service that you're providing and the communication you're providing as well.
I think that's partly the benefit I've perhaps had, is because I have come in and not been an estate agent, if you like. I don't do things perhaps the way other estate agents have done it. So I've got no issue with 3 solicitors down the chain. I'll just go, right, well, that's not happening. Okay, pick up the phone. Hello, this is da-da-da-da. And other people go, that's not really, well, I'll go, well, I don't care, because I need to know that. So I'm going to find it out. Whether that's the way it's done or not, I don't really care, because that's not getting my baby fed. So I've sort of come in a bit of a, well, this is how I'm going to do it, because that's how it needs to be done in order to achieve the end goal. So I'm not restricted by perhaps conventions and outlooks and training of other estate agents that go, well, no, that should be their agent, or that should be this, or that. So I'll just steamroller in and get things done. And as a result of that, I've got results which I feel vindicated in that approach, because people have really appreciated it. And people have said, out of the whole chain, at least, and these are people not necessarily direct to me, have said, well, at least Damian was ringing us and telling us what was going on.
It's massively valuable for reputation, that side of things, though, isn't it? Like you say, even if you've got a chain of 5 or 6 and you're actually not only servicing your client, but seem to be helping other people in the chain as well, people remember that sort of thing.
Well, I had a scenario, Jay, this sort of sums it up, where my purchaser, I rang him to commiserate him on his sale falling through. And I was just sort of, because obviously he was buying my property, I just went to touch base and allay his fears and say, look, the vendor's fine, we're going to wait for you, etc. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't think I'd be the person that broke that news to you. And he was like, yeah, no, I didn't know that our purchase had fallen through. And you're like, well, that's not good. I shouldn't be the,
No,
it sums up the scenarios that going on, whereas I was just on it and going, right, really sorry to hear this. And he's like, well, I didn't know that. Well, it shouldn't be me that broke that to you, to be fair.
No, I think it's really interesting. I mean, that from looking from the outside in, from my perspective, the models like Prestige and Village and EXP being another one, obviously they give yourself as the agent a bit more freedom, don't they, to provide that maybe personal touch and that communication and service. And I think it's a massive shake-up for the industry, in my view.
I think where it scores, and this is the key, is that as opposed to where I came from with EP, we are high service, low volume. So, and that's not a negative. That's, well, we don't need 20, 30 properties on our books to make a living and survive and pay the rent, etc. If we're working with 2, 3, 4, 5, would be, we'd be sort of at our limits, But because of the way it's structured financially, that we can earn a decent living, we can put the energy into providing a good service rather than constantly being worried about getting new properties on board. Obviously, that's a major part of my day-to-day. Of course it is. But if I've got, I've had times where I've had 3 or 4 properties on the go, and I go, right, well, I'm just going to have to sit and work on these for the next couple of weeks and get this through. And I'm not, because I know that income's going to come, I'm not under pressure immediately to be out canvassing every day and leaflet dropping and
I guess it's like what they've created is like a win-win then, isn't it? Because obviously you're financially in a good situation where you don't need to worry about selling loads and loads of properties, and it's a win on your side, but actually it's a win on the client side as well, because they're getting a great service, so everybody's happy. It seems so straightforward when you look at it that way.
Yeah, but also it allows me to be what I tell people I'm going to be, which is their one-stop shop. So if they come on board with me, I will be there for every step of the way. I'm not going to put you through to customer service or the progressor, or, well, we need to, that's the finance department, or no, it's me, and I will be there every step of the way. So people really like that, because they can ring me about any element of the process, and it is me that will sort it, as opposed to, not naming any big ones, but the customer, that they meet their agent, it gets listed, blah blah blah. Then you're into a customer service scenario, an hour on the phone to get through to be told that you're thinking, it's chaos. And okay, they may be cheaper options, but the service is reflected in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on a separate note, obviously, the last couple of weeks there's been a lot going on. It's been interesting in the estate agency world, with obviously interest rates going up and mini budgets and backtracking on mini budgets and so on. How much of an effect has that played in terms of your local market in and around Southend? Have you seen a big impact, or what's been there?
Initially, so far, prices have remained strong. There's not been some huge price gap, price drop, etc. But what it is caused is people being a bit more reticent, and certainly from an upgrading point of view, going, well, hang on, well, let's just see what happens. Let's see what's going to happen. The cost of living's gone up. We've not had the heating on for 6 months. We don't know where that's going to take us. Blah 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 blah. So people are sort of holding fire a bit. And then properties are still being listed. Of course they are. But then in terms of, say, 4 months ago, when you could sell in 4 days, that influx of interest is now less. But on the other side of that, not trying to sound mercenary, but the effects of the current climate will cause people to have to downsize and have to sell. So there will be an influx of properties that way, which will will inflate the market in some way. But it has stalled. It's a lot quieter. People are not in a panic to move because they're simply worried, how much more money am I going to have to need a month to get through my bills? And in my current property, let alone upgrading to a bigger place, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned there that actually prices have, despite all of that, have sort of maintained. They're certainly not free falling. So they seem
Not
to.
at all, no. Well, as per the information I get from you, Jake, you know, it's very stable at the moment, but that, you know, it's still very short off the effect, isn't it? This mini budget, interest rates, etc. So the effects probably haven't filtered back yet. I think once we've seen properties languishing on the market for longer periods, then price drops will occur. But also, if there's people in need to downsize or have to get out of their property, then there will be people having to reduce prices quite severely and quickly in order to try and attain a quick sale.
Maybe it'll force their hand a bit more.
Yeah, which is a negative, but in terms of the industry we're in, that's what I feel will happen.
And there's probably a lot of people out there right now, and possibly someone that will be watching this video as well, that will be in a situation where they're currently in the process of buying a property, and perhaps they've been going through that process for a month or two prior to the events of the last couple of weeks. What advice would you give to them right now? Because I would imagine there's, you know, people in that situation where they're in the process of buying a property are probably, to a degree, maybe a little bit nervous. I think might be fair to say. Well,
I think that the nerves are coming in, and it's happened to me. I've lost a property recently in that, with the interest rates varying, etc., mortgage offers aren't so rock solid as they were. So a chain could fall down quite quickly simply because a new offer can come out and the cost of that mortgage is now exceeded people's budget. And that's what happened to me. So things are tenuous, definitely. And I think this is where, going back to the service element, this is when you need a good agent to be focusing on all the elements and gathering that information. Because if you've got quite a long chain and first-time buyers at the bottom are struggling, and then this and that, you need that information, because and then you can be proactive. But they definitely it's no point skirting around it. It is a tenuous thing at the moment, as opposed to, you know, you didn't think about mortgage offers being retracted or anything like that, you know, 3-4 months ago.
No, and I'm going to ask you a question which might be impossible to answer. So I probably wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. In terms of the next sort of 3 to 6 months and possibly beyond, what's your opinion? What can you foresee in terms of the marketplace? And obviously, you mentioned that, especially with cost of living this winter, you know, it's going to be hard on quite a lot of people, and that might see a slowdown in number of buyers coming to the market. But how do you see prices rolling out, maybe over that 3 to 6 month time frame and beyond?
I definitely feel that prices will come down. I think simply because of the market, in terms of the restrictions on the number of buyers that can enter it, mortgages, and the insecurity. There will be people having to sell, wanting to sell, need to sell, etc. Prices will come down. Whether it will be a crash, I don't foresee a crash.
Maybe a correction or a softening of the prices.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, Jake, because I think prices, especially over the stamp duty holiday, etc., became ridiculous. And I did a couple of videos on it where you had agents fighting over properties, inflating the prices, then people feeling that the market was so buoyant, they were putting in silly offers. So the market became inflated and prices rocketed. So it could I feel it would be more of a correction of price, really. I don't foresee a huge crash, but definitely a flattening and a gradual decrease in prices.
Yeah, absolutely. So just reverting back to what we touched upon earlier, on a slightly lighter note, in terms of the service that you provide and that side of things, do you think, I mean, in my view, there's still some high street agents out there that do a tremendous job.
Absolutely, fantastic job, yeah.
It's not at all knocking high street agents generally. You can't tar every agent with the same brush for obvious reasons. But it's certainly, from what I've seen, I think it's pretty fair to say there's been some that have maybe failed in that aspect and have not delivered the service that is maybe required or expected now. It seems that that's almost made way for models like Prestige and Village to come through and fill that gap, almost fill that void that's maybe been left, where some high street agents in particular just haven't delivered in those areas.
I definitely think so. And I think some of the big online ones, if you like, where their pricing attracted so many people, but the fallout of their service has been catastrophic. And they come up in my Facebook feed, and you go into comments, and it's just one after the other of avoid, because you're saving thousands of pounds. But if you can't get through, you can't speak to anyone, etc., that frustration relative to the cost of selling a house isn't worth it. So providing the service is where I think people have fallen down. And it's one of the things that got me into it is the fact that was the feed. People, it's the most stressful thing you do, isn't it? And we've all been there. And even when it seems clear cut, it never is. It can be seriously stressful. So with a lack of communication, it just impounds the issue. So just providing a good service and being there and communicating, I think, will be key going forward.
Yeah, definitely. So I think you make a really good point. And you mentioned a bit earlier on actually about some of the videos that you do, and I regularly see you put the videos up on social media, on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you sort of discuss what's going on in your local market. And I think little things like that, there's probably a lot of people out there at the moment, certainly the next couple of months, are sort of just keen to see what might happen, and they might be considering selling in the new year. And if you're that person that's watching now that's maybe considering a move into the new year, I'd encourage you to follow Damian on social media, because actually the videos offer a huge amount of value and will probably give you that insight that you need in terms of what's happening. I think sometimes from a homeowner's perspective, I think quite a lot of the time they feel trapped to a degree if they're considering a move in a few months and want to know what the market's doing. There's actually very few avenues to find that out short of booking a valuation. And sometimes when I think people book a valuation, they're maybe a bit concerned that they might have an agent hassling them and so on. So I think as a free service, what you do online with those videos is fantastic.
The other side, Jake, is that I always say to people, look, I can come and talk to you. If you're thinking about a future move, let's just start here. Let's talk about it. Let's see what your aspirations are in terms of where do you want to go? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And let's just talk about that. Of course, we can incorporate evaluation, but if it's for the future, we'll have to reassess that. But I'm always happy just to talk to people and try and put in some sort of comprehensive plan and clear their thoughts, because often people, the classic one would be, oh, well, we'll put it up and we'll see what happens. Well, that doesn't work. So let's talk about what would happen if you did that and what's the best approach, etc. And just refine people's thoughts, the train of thought, and give them an idea of what they would need to do or how they would do it in the future. And it's free service, of course it is, but always happy to do it. And then that, like you say, that won't be followed up with weekly battering calls going, are you listening yet? Are you listening yet?
Yeah, and on that note, you've given me a great segue to lead into my next point. So if you are watching and you're in the Southend area or surrounding Southend area and you would like an idea of what your home might be worth, I'd recommend you speak to Damian, because genuinely, I've obviously watched you from afar for a little while and what you're doing online and social media. You can see from your reviews as well, there's no question that you deliver a fantastic service. So I think if anyone is right now considering making that move, even if it's not necessarily straight away, more of a long-term idea, reach out to Damian, give him a call, have a chat with him, because trust me, he's a great guy. He'll help you as much as he possibly can. And I'll actually, in the description of this video, I'm going to put the link to Damian's website. And if you're happy, Damian, I'll put your email address on there as well. So if people have got any questions.
Yeah, fantastic. Of course, Jay, always happy to help. And always here to talk. My phone's always on. If I don't answer it, I'm busy, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Damo. Great to catch up with you again and discuss a few points. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how things play out. But I think as you've rightly touched upon, communication is key. And I think as long as you deliver that consistently throughout, people know where they stand. So no matter what the market delivers, I think everyone will be prepared as much as possible, hopefully.
Absolutely. Good. Well, I'd like to say exciting times ahead. I think stressful times ahead, but we'll get
possibly. We'll have to wait and see. And we will be back next week as well with an updated video. So we're going to try and bring as many people as we can onto our clips and podcasts as well, just to try and discuss the market, what might be happening, discuss it from their angles. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to comment on our videos and subscribe as well. Until next time, thank you very much.